My abusive boss thought he was untouchable, until karma came knocking. I worked for a mid-sized company for nearly 5 years under one of the worst bosses imaginable. Let's call him Greg. Greg wasn't just a bad boss. He was the kind of boss that made you wake up dreading the workday before it even started. He was a narcissist, a bully, and a walking HR violation. But because he had been at the company for years and was tight with upper management, he was practically untouchable. HR? Completely useless. Complaints would magically disappear, and anyone who dared challenge Greg would mysteriously find themselves written up for minor infractions that didn't exist. But karma? Karma had plans for Greg, and when it finally hit him, it hit him hard. Greg's leadership style was a mix of verbal abuse, micromanagement, and taking credit for work he didn't do. He would scream at employees in meetings for not being proactive enough while also ignoring our suggestions. He made us stay unpaid overtime constantly. If you try to leave on time, he'd make a note of it and passive-aggressively question your commitment the next day. He gaslit us into thinking we were lucky to even have jobs, reminding us that there are 100 people out there who would kill for this position, and worst of all, he lied on performance reports to make himself look good, while throwing his own team under the bus. Despite how awful he was, no one could touch him. HR wouldn't do anything, and the higher-ups only cared that his department was performing well, which, as you'll soon find out, was a total lie. But then, Greg made a mistake. A big one. Greg had a habit of over-promising results to corporate, setting unrealistic deadlines, and then blaming us when we couldn't meet them. One day, he called me into his office over a report that wasn't even my responsibility. The numbers were off, because, surprise, surprise, he had been fudging them to make himself look better. But instead of owning up to it, Greg did what he always did. He blamed me. You're lazy, incompetent, and honestly, I don't even know why you still work here, he sneered. Maybe I should just fire you. That was it. I had been at this company for years, working my butt off. If I walked out, the department would crumble. Greg had no clue how to actually do the work himself. So, I decided, why not let it crumble? Setting the trap. Greg's biggest weakness? His ego. He thought he was the smartest person in the room, and that made him reckless. I started documenting everything. Every unfair demand, every insult, every time he forced us to stay late. And then, I went digging, and I found something huge. Greg had been altering financial reports for months to make it look like we were exceeding our targets. In reality, our department was barely keeping afloat because of his terrible leadership. If this got out, Greg would be toast. I wasn't the only one who hated him, so I rallied my coworkers. We gathered. Heavy checkmark emails where Greg took credit for work he didn't do. Heavy checkmark screenshots of him adjusting numbers on reports. Heavy checkmark statements from employees detailing his verbal abuse and threats. Heavy checkmark proof that he was forcing people to work overtime without compensation. Once we had enough dirt to bury him, we sent everything in a formal complaint, not to HR, but directly to corporate. And here's where it gets even better. The big boss, aka Greg's boss, was scheduled to visit our office for a quarterly review the next week. We made sure corporate got the complaint before the visit. The day the big boss arrived, Greg was smug. He strutted around like he was the king of the office, probably expecting to be praised for his leadership. Instead, he got a private meeting with corporate that lasted 3 hours. When he walked out, his face was ashen. No yelling, no threats, just pure, terrified silence. The glorious fallout. Turns out, corporate audited everything and found all the fake reports. Not only that, but multiple employees, including myself, had submitted official complaints about his abuse. The result? They fired Greg on the spot. No warning, no severance, no chance to explain himself. Just a security escort out the door while we all watched in satisfying silence. But wait, it gets even better. Because of the falsified reports, Greg was blacklisted from the industry. No reputable company in our field would hire him. His entire career? Over. He went from being an arrogant, power-tripping boss to working as a part-time sales associate at a retail store. And guess who got promoted to his position after he left? Me. The department thrived, morale skyrocketed, and for the first time in years, we actually enjoyed coming to work. Greg thought he was untouchable. Turns out, Karma had other plans.